Hello, thank you so much for visiting. And let's talk about planning really fun, engaging, and intentional women's ministry activities. But first, I want you to know that this is a companion. It's a companion to a blog post on womensministryresources.com. So I want you to take your time and go and review the blog post. Don't expect to view it in one setting, okay? It's a little bit lengthy because I designed it to be something of a master class, if you will, for how to design these activities in a way that they're intentional and meaningful and reach your desired goal or target. Okay? But before we get started, I definitely want you to know what I mean when I'm talking about women's ministry, because it can mean a lot of different things. Now, I'm not going to talk about in this session how to write goals for a women's ministry or anything like that. But I'm talking about, in general, women's ministry as an organized effort. Okay. It's something that is organized, structured with people who are in control of it and leading it and guiding it with a mission, a vision, and objectives and a plan. Okay. So a women's ministry is an organized effort. Okay. And it's designed to support Christian women in the context that I'm presenting it. All right, important that you know what I'm talking about. So I want you to know that it's usually part of a church, like your church may have a women's ministry and you may be a member of that leadership team, or you may be the leader. Or it could be a standalone effort that is happening outside in the community. But just know that when I'm referring to women's ministry, this is what I'm talking about, okay? It's an organized effort. It's designed to support Christian women. It could be either a part of a church or a standalone event, but it does not profit anyone financially for their personal reasons. Now, a women's ministry can make money. In my opinion, it should. It should be a revenue generating resource, but not for anyone's personal gain. Okay. It's something like a nonprofit, where a nonprofit can have an effort that makes money, but nobody should be driving a Benzo or a Lexus as a result of the money generated at that event or through that nonprofit. Women's ministry is not a business, okay? It can be run like a business in a lot of ways, but it is a effort that is designed to bless the women in the community or in the church, okay? That's what I'm talking about. So here's the thing. For we're going to talk about in this time your activities. Now, your activities, definitely you need to have a plan. Very often, activities are designed or even just taken off of the web, somebody's website, without a real plan or a goal. I want us to get away from that, especially in the body of Christ. We're designed to be people of excellence and to do excellent things for God. So I want us to get away from that. And I want you to think about having a plan for your women's ministry, anything. But in this time, we're talking about your activities. So I want you to think about it. You're planning your activities. You're not going to copy and pasting and then just customizing, but you're going to be thinking about, what do I want this thing to accomplish? Maybe you might think about your ministry event. What is it designed to accomplish? If it's a Bible study conference or a women's retreat focused on building confidence or something, you would want to link every activity to that overarching theme. There is a blog post on women's ministry resources.com that talks about developing and cultivating a theme for your women's ministry event. Be sure to check that out. There's a lot of information on that. But for now, I want you to know that even if you pull an activity from someone else's mind or idea, you're going to want to cultivate it, craft it, and morph it and mold it so that it's helping the women reach your ultimate goal for the event or the experience. Okay. So you also want to think about how women feel about what you're presenting them and how they feel during the presentation of what you're doing. Okay. So often we forget this part, and I think it's a big mistake. As you've read the blog post, you've heard me reference um, the affective domain, which is part of Bloom's taxonomy, but it's also part of Fink's taxonomy, Finks, if you want to look those things up. But basically, it's that part that reaches people on their personal, emotional level, their attitudinal level. And for women to engage and to be part of what you're doing and to fully expose themselves and be vulnerable to the point of sharing testimonies and sharing parts of themselves, you want to think about how you want them to feel. Now, I gave a lot of feeling words in that blog post, so make sure you check it out. But more often than not, you just want them to feel safe. You want them to feel comfortable. So you want to remember that when you're planning your activity. You're not going to plan a high risk activity when too soon in the event because women won't have this effective place where they need to be, where they will feel safe and comfortable to share. Okay? So I want you to think about you're being intentional. How do I want women to feel? You may even want them to feel, I don't know, challenged. It might be that type of a topic, but I want you to think about it, ponder it, and write down a few notes on the feelings you want to evoke and what you need to do to make sure they feel that way. Remember, I mentioned safety as one of the goals I like to reach for in just about every event. I often will make sure that I have really meaningful icebreakers so that women feel safe. Often I will make sure that the small groups are smaller, maybe no more than 3 people, to make sure that the women feel safe. I also will sometimes share ground rules for them. And by that, I don't mean rules they have to do, but more so rules that I have to do to make sure they know that I'm not going to sidetrack them or surprise them with information or to do something they didn't know that they were going to do. Very often I'll say, you know what, I'm so glad you're here, but this is a volunteer driven experience. You don't have to speak if you don't want to speak. I will never call on you in a way that will embarrass you. And those kind of things help people to feel just a little bit safer. Next, you're going to want to think about your launch point. And I give mine, which is before I do any activity, whether I customize it from someone else or plan it myself or make it up, I always think by the end of the activity, the women will blank. Now, in the blog post, I broke that down a little bit more in womensministryresources.com, and I give you some words that you can kind of plug and play and plop in and remove. But for me, this is the beginning point. By the end of the activity, I want the women to feel. I want the women to know how to do. I want the women to um, have acquired a certain competency. And if you go to the blog post, and I'm pitching it on purpose because I really go into more detail, you'll see a sample of how I've plugged and played for a Bible study activity. So you want to be really intentional, right? Here's the way I did it in the blog post. Um, I begin with that goal. And I usually will say by the end of the activity, the women will be able to, or the women can, or whatever. And then I insert a verb, right? And I look for a verb. What verb will encompass what I want them to be able to accomplish? What skill? What ability? What knowledge area? And then I also go into specific abilities, where I want them to be able to do whatever. And I list it out in the second box. Our line, I list out what that ability is. I may be able to say, like, if we're doing I don't know, I could do a prayer situation. By the end of the activity, women will be able to define what prayer is so that they can pray the ability and know that their prayers are effective and Bible based. I don't know, top of my head, but you get the impression and the idea. If you don't hear me, it didn't make sense the first time, go ahead and rewind this and hear what I just did. Okay? Now, I didn't put this in the blog post, but with activities, it's so good to have indicators so that I'll know that I was successful. The best one for me is to allow the women in their groups to report out. You got to do that. Build that time in to where each group gets to share what they experienced, learned, or what have you. This is a learning assessment technique. And what it is it will make sure that you know that you hit your goal or your target that you want it to hit. Now, another thing is I like to say a good simple indicator is what women will say or do. Now, a lot of times you can't see the do because they leave your event, right? You don't do life with them or live with them, so you don't really know what they do differently unless you maybe have a follow-up event or a Facebook group and you have people share what they're doing. But essentially, it's what people say. So during the debrief, listen to what they're saying, and make sure everybody gets a chance to have their thoughts conveyed by the reporter or the person who is reporting out. Okay. From there, you should have a goal. So once you have a goal, you can start thinking about your outcome. Now, it's very similar to the goal, but the end result, I think the outcome, I usually think of it as something a little less technical. It's shorter, it's quicker. So when the prayer example, I just want people to pray more. That would be my outcome, right? It wouldn't be as simple or as complex, rather, as that goal that I created with all those little pieces. But it is no, I just want them to pray more, right? You want to remember that affective domain. It bears repeating. And that's another tip. If you're a trainer, facilitator, or teacher, your important thing you want to repeat at least twice. Okay. So in that activity, give people ample opportunities to do something and learn something or experience something twice if it's kind of important. Okay. So that attitudinal piece. Now think about next. What do you want them to experience? I like to think about the experience as something that is fun, it's enjoyable, or it could be not melancholy, that's depressing. It could be more pensive or thought provoking or what have you. But think about what you want them to experience. You're not talking about the steps of your activity yet. No, you are thinking about what you want them to experience. For example, here sometimes I will say I want exuberant excitement, fun, giggling, chatter. That's what I want them to experience. Okay. If it's more of a pensive activity, I want them to go in a corner. I want them to write down what they're thinking. I want them to connect with God. And they can't do that in a loud, chatty, giggly experience, right? Or atmosphere. So think about what you want them to experience. Then I want you to think about the duration. How long about should the activity be? Now, here's the funny thing. The experience is going to really be a big part of dictating that because you're not writing out the steps yet. You're just kind of getting the idea. You're building the foundation of what you want this to be. Now's the time you build the steps. You start taking your pieces and you assemble until you have the experience and the activity outlined or defined. And good tip if you're not in the education field or a trainer or have done this a lot, go and look at sample icebreakers or activities in corporate arenas or in classrooms. And then you can kind of get some ideas. You don't want to take people's ideas. Don't, that's not what I'm saying. But you want to kind of see the flow and you can kind of see how people organize their ideas so you can assemble yours. So now you've got your overarching goal. You've got the vibe that you want to cultivate for your women's ministry activity. And you have an idea of how long it should be, and you have your foundation. You've got your event ready. You not your event, but your activity ready. And you should be ready to start really planning and pulling that thing together. Now, I want you to visit womensministryresources.com. I want you to subscribe and I want you to let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to make that a comment. I don't usually do comments on the post because I have a lot of reasons. But the main one is I am a busy person and I don't like to have somebody comment and I don't reply. And because I'm pretty busy, I kind of am not doing that with this blog. But what I will say is I'm going to open it up for comments. So if you have any questions, I invite you to post your questions. And if I can't answer it, hopefully someone else can. It's a fairly new effort, womensministryresources.com. But hey, we're going to begin a community and we're going to support women ministry leaders so that we can do awesome and exciting and effective things for Jesus Christ in the way of women's ministry. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to, if you're listening through YouTube only, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, and I would love it if you'd even share. Thank you so much, and God bless you.